So we have all of our little 5-inch pineapple blocks all stitched, and as you can see, I put it on one big piece of battleizer and just kept rehooping to save on battleizer. So now I'm going to cut them apart and trim them to make our pillow. So I'll just quickly cut them apart. Just to make the trimming a little bit easier. And the quilting designs on these pillows generally are going to have, it's one way. They're going to be able to face one way. So we want to be able to make sure they're facing the right way when we get them trimmed up. So now I have them all cut apart, and I'm going to use our trimmer by George to completely trim away the battleizer on every single block. And the trimmer has our nifty little metal edge. This is what it looks like. Metal edge is right here. And what we do is we turn back our face of our block, shimmy that metal edge right up to the basting line, and use a 60mm rotary cutter. And we're going to rotary cut all the battleizer off on all 4 sides, on all 8 of our blocks. I'm not going to trim the face of it just yet because depending on where the block goes, it gets trimmed a little differently. So this is what the front will look like, not much different. You just don't see battleizer around it. And on the back, you have no battleizer in your seam allowance. So I will go ahead and trim up the rest of these blocks, and then we'll show you how to trim the face. So now I have 4 of them trimmed up, and the other 4 I will do later, but I can go ahead and show you how to trim the face of them. So I'm going to lay them out so that my design is facing the correct way. So here is the top of my pineapple and the bottom of my pineapple. So the bottom, these 2 right here, is where our invisible zipper can be installed. So these 2 edges we want to trim to 1/2 inch. So I will go ahead and do that. I'll just turn my trimmer around to the other side and trim it 1/2 inch. That one was already about 1/2 inch. And because I know how I operate, I'm going to go ahead and put a pin there because I'll get on a roll later on and I'll go ahead and trim that the wrong way later. So if I put a pin there, it kind of prevents me from going crazy when I trim up the rest of the blocks and losing my 1/2 inch. So my 1/2 inch, need another pin. These are the 2 edges that will get my zipper. The rest of the edges can be trimmed 1/4 inch like normal. So from your basting line, you can go ahead and trim up the other 3 sides, leaving a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So there, that pin prevented me from just getting in the zone and keep on trimming, and then I've trimmed off my seam allowance that I needed. So you only need that 1/2 inch at the bottom. So these 2 blocks get that extra 1/2 inch, and the other 2 blocks don't. So we'll just go ahead and trim these leaving our 1/4 inch seam on all 4 sides. All right, so we have our top 2 blocks. This is for one side of the pillow. The other side's going to be exactly the same. And then our bottom 2 blocks. And so we can go ahead and pin these and stitch them. So we're going to pin them in rows, of course. So we'll pin these top 2 together first, right sides together. And we'll take a pin and put the pin right at the corner, right at the corner on the other side. Pinch those together, and then take a second pin and put it in. And we'll do the same thing on the other corner. And then these are the smaller blocks, so the bigger blocks are going to have a few less match points, but you're going to pick a match point along your seam line. I'm going to pick the top of the pineapple, pretty much right there. And I'm going to put my pin across on the other one in the same place and pinch it. Just whatever works depending on the pillow you're doing. And these are small, so I don't think I need to do every single pineapple. So I'll just pick a couple in the middle. So there we go. So we're going to go ahead and pin all these, trim up the other side of my pillow, pin them all, and we'll stitch all of our seams. And we'll be back. So I'm at the sewing machine and I've got just straight stitch on. I'm going to use my walking foot. I did put a dark thread in there, so hopefully you'll be able to see where I'm stitching. And on my straight stitch, whenever I sew blocks together, I like to make my stitch length a little bit longer than normal, like say a 3.0. It just works a little better for me. And I'm going to start stitching my blocks together, and this is the seam allowance for where the zipper is going to go. It's a little bit longer, 1/2 inch. And normally when I sew a block together, and I'm going to do it on this one too, I put my needle right at that corner on my battleizer where my basting stitch is, and I'm going to do that again. I always start here and I do a little back tack and then I come forward, as opposed to starting here and coming forward. I find this works better for me. So we'll go ahead and do that. Put the needle in right there. Take the pin out. We do not need to stitch over the pin. And I'll just do a small back tack. 2-3 stitches. And then come forward, staying pretty much on that basting line. And I pull my pins out before I get to them. And when I get to this end, I come forward into the seam allowance and I just take a back tack right there. And then cut my thread. So we will go ahead and see what that looks like. So there's my stitching line. And when we open it up, we should have some matching pineapples, and we do. So I will go ahead and stitch together. This is the bottom of one side of my pillow. I'll go ahead and stitch the rest of my sections together. So now we are ready to take these to the iron and get them pressed, and then we'll stitch the top 2 blocks to the bottom 2 blocks. So here we are at the ironing board, and I'm going to go ahead and take out my pins I put in there for my extra seam allowance because I don't need to worry about that anymore. And we're going to press our seams to one side. So I do like to use a little bit of spray starch. Set the seam, and then open it out and press it on the front. My pineapples line up real nice, and then we can just turn it over and make sure. Oh, I caught a little bit there, but I'm not going to worry about that. That will be fine. So this seam is pressed that direction. So the one that gets attached to it up above, I'm going to go ahead and press this direction. So we'll again set the seam. And I want to press it this way. So I have one seam going that way and the one above it going the opposite way. So this is one side of my pillow, and the other side of my pillow, if you think about it, it would be kind of nice to not just randomly press it in one direction. It's going to be stitched, this will be the other side of my pillow. So this seam allowance is going this way. So I think we'll think ahead and get the other seam allowance going that way. So they're opposite again. So we'll set our seam and then press it open. Now this, I just thought of something. This particular one, I did not use the optional wool in my block. I just used battleizer. So if you do opt to use the wool, you do not want to press over it the way I am. You're going to want to carefully press it, just the seam part. So now these two will be opposite. So this is one side of my block. This is the top of my other one. And we'll take out the pins for the bottom where the zipper is going to go. Set our seam. So if you're using the wool, you'll just press right along here. And let's see, this is the bottom. This seam is going this way, so this one I want to go that way. So if you're using the wool, just very carefully use the tip of your iron and press your seam. And then you can roll it over and press it on the back side as well, just using the tip of your iron. But because I'm not using the wool, I can go ahead and press the whole thing. So now we are ready to stitch our top row to our bottom row. So we'll just put them right sides together and pin our match points as we did before. So we'll put a pin right there at the seam first. I like to match the seams first. Right there. And the pin will go across to the opposite seam. Hold it nice and tight. And I usually put a pin in both sides, so both my seam allowances are pinned down. Then I like to go ahead and do the corners next. Same method, put the pin through it, pinch it nice and tight, take a second pin, and then we'll go ahead and pin a few match points on our pineapples right at the seam line. And I'm not going to do every single little pineapple. I'll just do about like that. So I've got my seam in the middle matched, my corner, and then I just did a couple of match points in the middle. Now if you're doing the bigger block, I have 2 pins and match points in the middle of my block. I would do probably 3 on the 8-inch block that makes the 16-inch pillow, just because it's a longer area and you're going to need a little bit more security than 2 pins. So I've got this one pinned and ready to go. I'll go ahead and pin my other pillow, and then we'll take it back to the machine and stitch the seam. So here we are at the machine, and we're ready to go ahead and stitch our seams of our 2 rows of blocks, top and bottom of our pillow. So starting the same way, we're going to lower the needle right at the corner, back stitch off, and then just stitch right along our basting line. Trying to keep your seams going the right direction. So there's our seam, and when we open it out, there we have our perfectly matched pineapples. So this is one side of our pillow. We'll go ahead and stitch the other side of our pillow. And there's our other seam. And more perfectly matched pineapples. So now I'm going to take this to the iron and press this seam in opposing directions, the front and the back, and then we're ready to install our invisible zipper. So we're going to go ahead and press the seam, the last seam we just did. And again, if you're using the wool, just use the tip of your iron and press the seam one direction, tip of your iron if you're using wool. I'm not, so I'm going to go ahead and press it down. Turn it over and make sure it's all going the right way, and this looks good. So this is one side of my pillow. Here's the other side of my pillow, and I do have my 1/2-inch seam allowances at the bottom, so this one's going up. I'm going to press this one down. So this one will go down. So I like to do that from the right side. Tip of your iron if you're using wool. And then just give it a really good press. So here's my 2 sides of my pillow with all of my seams going in opposing directions. Yay! So now it's time to get my zipper ready. So we'll be right back to do that. So here's a quick peek at our larger pineapple pillow. And this is what the invisible zipper looks like. You can hardly see it. There's our little zipper tab right here. And if you look closely, you can see it, but it looks fantastic. It's just a great, nice look, and you'll be able to reuse your pillow forms. So we're going to install an invisible zipper at the very bottom of our pillow. These are great because you can get your pillow forms in and out very easily and maybe reuse them. So if you do all of our cute little pillows for this year for HoopClub, you'll be able to reuse your pillow forms. You know, you can switch them out easier. If you don't want to mess around with the invisible zipper, which I think it's really easy to put in when you get a few tips and maybe read the directions. If you don't want to use it, you can just hand sew it shut. But we're going to show you how to do it. So I opened up my zipper, and I'll just press all the creases out of it. You want to get them longer than what you need. For this color, I was only able to get the 21 to 22 inch, so that's what I got. Usually on the small one, if you can get a 12 to 14, I think they come, you can go ahead and get that, but you want to get it longer than your pillow. So I've pretty much got the creases pressed out of the zipper tape. The next step, and by the way, I'm getting all these great directions from the zipper itself. So it tells you right on there, we're going to use an invisible zipper foot, which they say to use the Coats invisible zipper foot. My machine actually has one, so I will use that. And step 2, we have to open our zipper from the wrong side, iron the zipper coils flat so the 2 rows of stitching show. So that's what I'll do, open my zipper, turn it over. So here's my zipper tab. I'm going to turn it over so it's upside down. And then this is a coil that we need to press it kind of flat and open. So we're getting that coil opened out so that we can stitch really close. There we go. And even though we don't use the whole length of the zipper, I go ahead and do the whole thing. Right up to the tab. So hopefully you can see that this one is pressed open flat and this one is still coiled. So by pressing it open flat, we're able to stitch real close to that coil edge using your invisible zipper foot. And this won't hurt your iron at all. It's just a nylon zipper. It won't melt. Okay, so now our coils are pressed nice and flat. So now we will go to the sewing machine and stitch it in. So we're here at the sewing machine and we're going to go ahead and start to stitch our zipper in. And if you measure this zipper tape, they're talking about revealing that little stitching line. So if I measure that, it's about 3/8 of an inch. We have a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the bottom. So we're going to line up our zipper coil, leaving about 1/8 of an inch exposed right here, which will help us stitch it right on that basting line. And if you look at step 3 of your zipper instructions, it tells us to pin the right side of the zipper to the right side of the fabric, coil on the 5/8. They're talking about a garment, so we're going to put it on our seam line, and the top stop of the zipper 3/4 inch below the fabric. We're not doing that. We're basically going to center it, but it's the orientation that I wanted you to see. The zipper is right side down, so the little pull is underneath. There's my little pull. It's actually underneath. And we're going to pin it, leaving about about the middle of my zipper, however long it is. And we're going to leave about 1/8 of an inch exposed. So I'm not going to put a lot of pins because I think they'll just sort of get in my way. So leaving about 1/8 of an inch exposed, I'm going to put just a couple of them. So again, right side of the zipper down. Have your extra zipper side that's not pinned to your fabric over your pillow, and then just pin it like this. And we are going to use our invisible zipper foot. A lot of machines will have these days, so we'll talk about that and get that stitched on there. So here's my invisible zipper foot, and it has two little tunnels. If you see those little tunnels, they will ride right over the zipper coil. So I'm going to put that on my machine, and if your machine doesn't have one, you can pick one up. The same company that makes the zipper, the invisible zipper, will also sell the feet, and you can generally get them in the same store. So I've got my zipper pinned with my 1/8 inch exposed, and I've made a mark with a red friction pen right there. It's about 1 inch in from my outside basting line at the beginning and also at the end. And this is where I'm going to start my zipper stitching and end my zipper stitching. So it just kind of gives me something to follow. So the little tunnels, I guess, in your zipper foot are going to ride right over your coils, the coils. So I'll start again about 1 inch in, lower my needle, get my pin out of the way, and I'll just do a small back stitch here. And I'll go ahead and stitch my zipper in. And that coil is going to ride right into the tunnel of the zipper foot. And here's where I'm going to stop because there's my red line. It's about 1 inch in from the outside basting line. Did a little back stitch. So you should be able to see the black stitching. And I started at the red line, ended at the red line, and hopefully when I turn this back, I'm pretty much on my basting line of the bottom of my pillow. So I'm happy with that. So now we're ready to add the other side of the zipper. So if I turn this over and zip it up, you can see how it'll look on one side. It looks pretty good. And what I like to do is again take my friction pen and just lay my zipper flat, and I will make a line right at that basting line. Then I know where to line it up for the other side of my pillow. So that's where I will line it up. And then we're also going to need our 1 inch again. Let's see. We can put that about right. There's our 1 inch, so I know where to begin and end my stitching. And then these are going to go right sides together, the pillow front and back. This is how I like to lay it. It just is less confusing for me. I lay the pillow front and back right sides together, and then this zipper tape will just go like this. And at that point I can flip it over and I can see where my coil is going to be. So I can line up that red line even with my basting stitch. Leave my 1/8 of an inch at the bottom. And just put a pin there to kind of hold it in place. And I'll match up this red line with the other end, leaving my 1/8 inch at the bottom. And just a couple of pins to keep your 1/8 inch. And just to be sure we have it right, let's see here. If I were to open it out like this and zip up my zipper, you can see that it would be the right direction. So I always give it a check before I start to sew, because you can get turned around. So now I'm ready to stitch this side, so we'll do that. So I'm going to come in my 1 inch, lower my needle at my 1 inch next to my zipper coil, pull my pin out, and just do a little back stitch. And I'm going to stop where my red line is, which is 1 inch away from the basting line. Do a little back stitch. Hopefully you can see my black stitching line. Oh, and I can kind of see where here I'm not real close, so I'm just going to take another little stab at that. Try to get that a little better. That's better. So again, we'll go ahead and check and make sure when we zip this up. Look at that. Invisible zipper. Awesome. So now we can go ahead and stitch the seams on our pillow form. So our zipper's in, we're ready to go ahead and pin the rest of our pillow together. So I zip it about halfway closed because we need to leave an opening to turn it from. Maybe not quite halfway. Or it'll go about, I don't know, maybe 1/3 closed. Then we'll put our pillows front and back, right sides together, and we're going to go ahead and pin our seams just as we've been doing. We'll pin our opposing seam first in the middle of it, of the pillow. And we thought ahead and all our seams are going the right direction. Then we'll pin the corner. Couple of match points to line up our pillows or our pineapple stitching. This is the bottom corner where the zipper is, where we left that extra inch. So I'm going to match that corner. Then do a couple of match points again. So what I like to do when I do these, I like to do one side at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch this side, but not with my invisible zipper foot. I'm going to go and put my walking foot back on. So when I get to this corner where we left the 1 inch, I'm going to stop exactly at the corner. With my needle down, pivot, pull this zipper tape out of the way, and I will stitch up to it as close as I can, but I don't want to stitch into it, so I'll just get as close as I can. Back stitch a little bit. So I'm about, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch or so away. So that will be my corner when I go to turn it. So we'll go ahead and stitch up the other side the same way, then we'll stitch across the top. So I've got my zipper in, I've got my sides of my pillow stitched. What's left to sew is the top of it, but let's make sure that you've opened your zipper so that you can turn it later. So I'm ready to stitch the top of my pillow closed, and I wanted to give you a little tip I learned a long time ago in the clothing sewing that I used to do. When you're stitching across this, normally you would stitch here, pivot, and turn, but I didn't do that. So instead of starting here and going straight, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over. Get that thread out of here. Turn that right at my seam line. Hopefully you can see that. So I'm going to basically be stitching that down. And when you do that, you get a really nice sharp corner. It's amazing how that works. You would think it would be bulky to leave it in there, but you're not going to have to trim it. You're not going to have to, cut off that corner and maybe get a hole later. It's all going to stay there, and it's actually going to make a nice sharp corner. So we will do the same thing when we get to the other end. turn it right on that seam line and stitch right over that seam allowance, and I might just use my scissors to help me hold it. Back stitch. So can you see how we did that? We just turned that right over, stitched it right closed. So on the other end where the zipper is, we are not going to do that little trick because we need to have that open. It'll just help. But we do need to do a little work on our zipper. We're going to cut this off, and before we cut it off, I want to zigzag over the coil, just as act like a zipper stop so it doesn't come apart. So I'm going to set my machine for a zigzag, make it nice and wide as you probably can go to get it over that zigzag or get over that coil, and then maybe drop your feed teeth on your sewing machine so it doesn't move. And we have an inch, so I'm going to, there's my seam line mark. I'm going to kind of pick it about right there, like between 1/2 an inch from where our stitching is. And I'll just do a zigzag right over that coil. Just let it build up a little bit. So my stitching of my zipper started here. This is my seam line, and I put my little zigzag right in the middle, so I'm going to end up cutting it off here. So it will be out of the corner. So I will do the same thing down here. This one is open, so we have to kind of hold it together. So yeah, that'll work. So we will go ahead and trim those and turn our pillow. So here we are, we're ready to trim off the ends of our zippers and get our pillow turned. I'm going to go ahead and cut away some threads. Now when I trim off the ends of my zippers, I'm not going to use my nice little hoop scissors because it'll definitely not be good for trimming fabric later. If I use that nice fabric scissors to trim that off, I'm going to use these. I love these. And I'm just going to leave about 1/4 of an inch. Past my zigzag end. So that's well away from my corner when I go ahead and turn it. And this is going to stay open. I'm not going to worry about trimming any of that seam allowance. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. And now that we left our zipper open, we can go ahead and turn this pillow around. I like to take that corner that we stitched down and poke that in first. And I'll do the other one too. I'll grab that, poke that in first. And I'll take this scissor with a little bit bigger point on it and very, very, very carefully coax that out. Coax that little corner out. Don't get too aggressive, poke it right through. So you got a pretty nice sharp corner considering we have a lot of fabric in there and a lot of battleizer too. There's just a little bit of battleizer caught in the corner. So it makes a really nice corner. You see that? It's pretty good. So then we'll turn the zipper one in too. Turn out that little corner. And gently coax that out. And this corner here. Turn Turn that around. Give that one a little coaxing. And then we have our pillow cover ready to go. Zip it up. Look how pretty that seam looks. We're ready to go ahead and stuff it. So here's my little 10-inch pillow form. And yes, I'm going to go ahead and tear away. The pillow is so small, the tag is huge. Tear away this tag and open out my cover. This pillow form has a zipper at the bottom, so I'll try to keep the zippers on the same end. I don't think it really matters, but that's what I'll do. And just kind of fold it. Put him in there. Trying to keep him square. I'll shove him way down in there while I zip this shut. So once you get him in there, just whack it on the table a couple of times, get it into place. And then you can see we have our pretty little invisible zipper at the bottom of our pillow. So now we're ready to make the wrap.